Redditors who have moved to a new city, state, country, what is the most infuriating well, this is how it's done here thing you've come across? I moved to a very small country town. They had a recycling program. Every week a guy would pick all the recycling up, separate to the trash. I soon found out, when I questioned the regular plume of smoke I saw in the distance, that the recycling was picked up on a Wednesday and set alight on a Thursday by the same guy. And it was an agreed upon and accepted fact in town. France. Store hours are fked. Everything opens sort of whenever. Usually 9ish. Closes for 2 hours at lunchtime. Then closes for the day at 5. And everything's closed on Sundays. It's difficult to find time to run errands while going to school. Was in Toulouse once. Wanted to buy some sandwiches over lunchtime. The sandwich shop was closed for lunch. I'm no sandwich economist, but that seems like bad business. Moved from a state in Mexico, Hidalgo, to another, Puebla. When it comes to tacos, they put the tortilla first, then a bit of cheese, then the meat. As opposed to the more reasonable tortilla, meat, cheese combination they do in my hometown. It drives me crazy. You can barely taste the cheese. I hate tacos in Puebla. Ugh. Pittsburghers calling slices of ham warmed in a slow cooker with sweet ketchup barbecue. As a homesick Texan, attending my first Pittsburgh barbecue lunch was a gut punch of fury and disappointment. Edit. Boy. Some of yins are salty. This happened over 2 decades ago. I'm sure things have changed. And while you may know what real barbecue is, you persist in calling chip chop ham in sauce barbecue, thus proving the point of the thread. Also, I'm back in Texas, so all is well on my personal brisket intake. Thanks for your concern. I moved to England when I was a teen. British teenagers. Man. I don't know how the UK even functions. Alcoholism is a sport. Petty crime and vandalism is an art form. It's the alcohol that I could never adjust to. There is drinking. Binge drinking. Seriously binge drinking, and then there's a night out in Sheffield. I moved to NZ from the USA. People go barefoot everywhere here. Stores. Offices. The supermarket. Schools. Everywhere. I even went to see my doctor once and she was walking around barefoot in the examining room. Having grown up in the typical American no shoes, no shirt, no service culture, I've never quite adjusted to this facet of Kiwi life. Not really infuriating but mildly annoying. Many moons ago I moved from southeast UK to the northeast. On one of my first days I fancied a burger, so popped to the chip shop. Now, in the south, asking for a burger and chips in a chippy will get you a burger in a bun with lettuce, tomato and possibly ketchup. And some chips obviously. Well, upon ordering my burger up here I was handed a dry disc of what smelled like dead, sweaty horse. Battered and deep fried. No bun. No salad. Upon inquiring as to what the FCK I had just been given, I was informed we don't do burgers like that, mate. You need to get one from a pizza shop. So I dutifully wait until the pizza shop opens after 5 PM because northerners, and order my much anticipated burger. Upon biting into it I tasted something amiss and opened it up to have a look. Cucumber. In a f-king burger. Who the hell puts cucumber in a burger? Seriously. I just make my own these days. Fucking cucumber. Moved from the northeast down to southern USA where people are unfailingly friendly and polite. Unless you don't reciprocate. Was so used to walking around with my head down minding my own business in the north. When I started doing that in the south, I'd get some passive aggressive pushback. Like if I was ordering something to eat, it was basically expected that you had to have a mini conversation with the server before you actually made your order. Started hearing around the office that I had an attitude too just because I didn't really do the whole pleasantries thing. Did my work. Helped out. But because I didn't engage in superficial small talk, I was deemed rude. When someone finally clued me in, I started changing and it's like a complete 180 with how people interact with me now. I mean, it took a while for me to adjust initially. And sometimes I just want to hunker down and do my work. But it definitely makes a difference. Canada to central Mexico. All toilets are flushed into the waterways from 2,600 meters altitude to the ocean, making all watershed non-potable. So their economy is always struggling because the people spend a large portion of their income on potable water. The nutrients, erosion, and chemicals all create dead zones in our oceans. Plastic garbage is burnt into our atmosphere in many communities. Processed food is king here after foreign companies moved in, filling their store with plastic packaged everything. Animal neglect. Apathy. Animals are tied up in the sun with no water. A farmer may hurt himself and not make it back to the animals and have them all die from dehydration. Factory farming of chickens here is disgusting. Dead or dying dogs. More than 80 pairs of animals I have checked are covered in fleas. I live with 3 audio headsets and earplugs because of the vehicles with loudspeaker on their roof blasting advertisements into your home every day. Starting 0800 as late as 2230. Police are useless here, even when you have video evidence for them. One I don't hear very often. I moved from the East Coast to Chicago and noted that in the Midwest, people don't look both ways and pay attention while crossing streets. If there's a walk sign, or even sometimes when not, you just cross streets. Headphones on. Head down. No problem. Natives here don't yield when merging onto highways from the on-ramps. They won't adjust their speed and won't even look to see whether the lane is clear. They just plop themselves right into the middle of traffic and expect everyone else to swerve out of the way. Oftentimes they do this going 10 or 15 miles below the speed limit. Absolutely infuriating and dangerous as FCK, but considered normal here. Eugene. Or, I was brought up in a very small place, and my wife was brought up in London. Once, when we visited my hometown, she decided it would be a nice idea to have the florist deliver some flowers to my auntie Carol from the next town over, to say thanks for the nice dinner we'd had the previous evening. She goes into the florist, selects some flowers, and starts to make arrangements for the delivery. She's surprised when the florist doesn't need the address, and even more surprised when the florist says it's pointless delivering them today, as Carol won't be in this evening, as it's the day when she goes to the big town to get her hair done and play cards with the girls. This all seemed entirely normal to me, but freaked my wife out somewhat. Illinois to Kentucky. I really kind of hate the people here. They're so on the surface nice. They're also all terrible at driving. They won't turn right on a red light even if there are no cars coming. They also won't turn on green lights with no cars coming. They don't use their turn signals. I've never been somewhere with such a large number of people who don't turn their headlights on when it's raining or dark out either. I almost took a lady on a scooter out because I didn't see her because she had no headlight on. They go 20 plus over the speed limit, but complain about getting pulled over. They're also the biggest supporters of statements like "you're one of the good ones," though directed at racial minorities. Now I've been all over the South, and a lot of them are just racist. But in Kentucky it's like they're trying to justify their racism with thinly veiled arguments like "you're not all like that." Oh, and they over to claim Lincoln was a Kentuckian. He didn't set foot in this f-king state after he moved. He was a practicing attorney in Illinois and he's on basically everything Illinois has. Also, Rand Paul. Just moved to Singapore. Love most of it, but a few things are completely retarded. Work situations mostly. Locals are not used to making decisions, so they never decide on anything and just try to pass it on to the next guy. Scared shitless of losing their jobs, I guess. This makes it the most inefficient place I've ever worked. Everyone does everything at the last minute. If you're running an event, for example, in normal places you have a go or no go date. Here, you don't cancel because people don't decide they're going to something until the day before day of. It takes 15 minutes to drive clear across the city. And people still manage to leave with not enough time and then are speedy and road raggy. From Alberta, Canada with a Texan. There are almost too many of those moments for me. But the biggest one surround the eerie cultish religious influence down here. The latent racism and exclusiveness for Mexicans in particular, and sometimes blacks, although it's not as bad as many would think. People here accuse Mexicans of stealing jobs and driving down wages. Yet they generally support free trade and access to foreign markets. I can also confidently say that about half of everyone I've discussed this with completely deny climate change. I guess it is just always hot in Texas, so who would notice? Also, everyone here has a truck, but no one needs a truck. Where I come from, everyone also has a truck. But if you spend one December in Alberta, you'll understand why. But the biggest WTF moment is the same WTF moment I get everywhere in the US. Biscuits and gravy? Moved to Manitoba from Alberta. Had never heard of a social. People thought I was weird. What's a social? It's a party a married couple throws before they get married. There's drinks and a raffle and all this stuff. But you buy tickets to get in and the booze isn't free. It's a party to raise money for the wedding. I have a friend from the Philippines that's getting married, and she told me the only reason she's having a social is because when people found out she was engaged, they asked when the social was. She had people she just met asking if they could buy tickets to her social. You go to most parts of Canada, no one knows what these are. Personal experience. Parole required me to have a job. Parole also required me to risk losing that job because I had to leave early to show up to my weekly parole check-in, and my boss didn't like that. They finally agreed to change my check-in days because my boss called my parole officer and threatened to fire me if I had to keep leaving work early. If you expect him to be able to drop everything to run downtown and check in with you at a moment's notice, don't expect him to be able to maintain consistent employment. You can't require someone to do something and then prevent them from doing it. Double quote. I moved from an isolated outback town to the second biggest capital city in Australia. The biggest thing I struggled to adjust to is how sensitive nice friends are to each other. Back home, my friends and I would say all sorts of horrible stuff to each other. To anyone from the city, we would have sounded like racist, sexist, homophobic stereotypes, but there was kind of a no offense intended, no offense taken rule. You could call a friend or colleague a horrible racist name and it'd be a laugh. But if you meant it, you were immediately put in your place, or if they ever reacted like too far, mate, you'd just never say it again. No big deal. It took me a long time to work out how friendship works down here. I've found a couple of people I can get rough with, but I've mostly trained myself to pull right back. Now when I go back home, it takes me a while to get used to hearing friendly racial slurs amongst my friends. Moved from Australia to London. Long list of things that messed with me, but one was that in London you can just cross a zebra crossing as soon as you get there, and all the cars, regardless of speed, have to stop for you. In comparison, in Brisbane you have to actually wait at the side of the road for some kind enough person to come along and stop for you so you can cross. Thought the friend I was walking with was going to get hit when he first did it. I moved to Cleveland and was shocked at how many restaurants sold gyros. Even ones that made no sense to be selling them did, and most hot dog stands did as well. The real kicker was that everyone there mispronounced it gyro. I got so fired up once when I ordered one pronouncing it the correct way, and the girl at the register looked at me like I was a special kind of idiot and corrected my pronunciation and all but rolled her eyes at me. I was so close to going back with a video on how to pronounce it, but lucky for her the food was great and cured my hanger towards her. An American in Spain. When someone doesn't want to be bothered. I hear no. In Spain that doesn't exist, or no, in Spain we. And sometimes for ridiculous things. I've lived here for 8 years. But it doesn't matter, I still get it. It can be for stupid things like when I go to ask for a product and they say it doesn't exist in Spain. Then I see it on the shelf behind me. Once, the phone company didn't give me the discount they promised, and when I called to ask, they no joke said, well, here in Spain 25% is different. And it's just to get out of doing anything about it. I'm fluent It's not a lack of communication. San Francisco rentals can be quirky and frustrating. But the worst part for me is that some of the older, charming units have no soundproofing between floors, so you can hear every single step and conversations and babies crying and snoring. It's like a boarding house. Except you're easily paying double or more likely triple what it would cost for a nice single family home anywhere else in the country that's not New York. I used to come home from work to have my downstairs neighbors already at my door complaining that I'm being too loud before I'd even entered the house. Bitch. I just came home. I don't have any pets. And there's no one else in my house. I couldn't even walk around in my apartment in my socks without them complaining. Towards the end of my lease I'd leave my sound system on and point it at the floor and leave for the weekend. Sure, it's a DCK thing to do, but FCK it. Moved from the USA to Lebanon. People are straight rude if they're at work. Particularly if they're in the service industry. I was straight mocked to my face for being friendly to wait staff, shopkeepers, etc. Finally back in America, and I love having my people at my regular shops. They'll even hold stuff for me because they know I'll want it. Tell me about special deals. It's awesome. But whenever I go visit there I have to act like an uppity BTCH to get good service. The government doesn't want to help you with much of anything. But they especially don't care if someone is in a truly abusive situation. I work with a woman who has special needs. And she has a small child. She and the child are both abused and purposely underfed by her mother. And I want to find them somewhere else to live. I was told by a government official, "Madam, this is Africa. What is abuse?" And then was asked to leave his office. Most of the time. No one will help in situations like that because that's just how it is here. Culturally. If you have any sort of mental illness, it's fine if someone hurts and or takes advantage of you. Edit. Spelling and grammar because I typed in a furious manner. Great rhyme. Close bracket. I'm from West Virginia and moved to Virginia after graduating from college for work. Naturally, I hear tons of disparaging comments about West Virginia and West Virginians in general, like, the incest jokes are never ending. I hear something at least once a week. Sometimes from people I just met. Or even complete strangers that may pick up on something or overhear something in conversation. 90% of it is just people joking around. Which I usually laugh along with since I'm a good sport. But that other 10% annoys the FCK out of me. It's mostly from people who I really do believe mean well. But are just totally oblivious to how ignorant and pretentious they sound with the questions they ask and the statements they make. The two that really get me are, "I bet you are just so much happier here. Aren't you?" And "Ugh. I'm so glad I'm not from West Virginia. Virginia is great." The funny, infuriating thing about it is that these people have clearly never paid any attention to what's going on outside of Nova Richmond, Virginia Beach. Southern and Western Virginia really isn't any better than West Virginia. Honestly. Moved from Japan to England 4 years ago. I'm still not used to the shitshow that is the English rail system. The trains are dirty. The scheduling is wildly inconvenient unless you are traveling from London or a major city. You're lucky to get one train per hour. Journeys are regularly delayed or cancelled, and unless you're more than an hour late you have no recourse to complain, be compensated. And to top it all off, it's expensive as hell. And the rates keep going up. I honestly have no idea how they justify these costs. The other day my train was delayed because they were unable to drive the train on the track because of leaves. Moved to Boston. I don't know what the FCK water bubbler is. And I throw my trash in a can. Not a barrel also. If I go to Dunkin' Donuts and order a bagel with cream cheese, I expect the cream cheese on the bagel so I can eat it on the drive to work. But no. Not in Boston. You get a knife and a little packet of cream cheese and you have to apply it yourself at a red light or wait to get to work to eat your breakfast. When I first finished my enlistment I moved to a small town in AR. We lived outside police jurisdiction and outside of a trash pickup zone. At first, I hated moving trash to the dump. But then after a few weeks I realized that I no longer had to deal with trash pickup. If I wanted to get hammered the night before and not wake up to take out the trash, I could just run it down the hill later on. Party trash that you don't want sitting in your bin for a week? Dump. Petrified possum that your dog brought home from the creek? Dump. Also, the guys at the dump were way cool and always wanted to know the backstory to my trash. I love telling stories. So it worked out perfectly and I eventually grew to love heading over to the dump where they'd let me smoke a J while I tossed my trash and shot the shit with the old guys and work release inmates who were there every day. Damn, I miss not having a dump nearby. I lived in Malta for a year and there were two in particular. 1. They don't have storm drains. Now it doesn't rain much in Malta, but the few days when it does rain moderately the streets simply flood. To make it worse, it's quite hilly, so all the water collects at the bottom and you get cars literally floating in water. Happens every year. 2. Most people heat their homes with gas and when your gas tank is empty, you simply bring it down to the gas tank truck and buy a new one. But how do you know when the gas tank truck will arrive? Well, that's easy, it simply drives by every week. Usually around 6 AM on a Tuesday where I lived. And it drives really slowly, honking its horn constantly so that anyone who needs a new gas tank, which happened to me exactly once the entire year, will wake up and have enough time to run down with money in the empty gas tank. The fact that the entire neighborhood is also woken and forced to stare up by the mercilessly incessant honking is just a side effect of this ingenious system. I moved to Germany from the US and getting internet service was unbelievably difficult. In the States you call the cable or phone company about establishing service. A technician comes out within a week and they won't leave before you're able to establish connectivity. In Germany, I signed an internet contract in late October and was told I would hear from someone in a few weeks. When I finally did get the letter confirming a date for the technician to come out, it's for early December. So the technician finally comes out, conducts diagnostic tests to ensure my port has been activated, and then he starts to leave. I ask if we can test to make sure I can log in and he tells me that's not his job. He only activates the ports and I should contact the cable company if I'm unable to get on the internet. So he leaves and despite having bought a pretty expensive router built to handle the speeds I opted for, I still couldn't log on. Numerous phone calls and a week later, the internet provider recommends I buy their special router, which is pretty expensive. And of course everything works fine. It was a frustrating experience overall. However, one good thing is that my phone and internet plan cost a fraction of what I paid in the States. Moved from a rural town in northern Canada to a small city of only 6+ million people in China. The biggest difference is the driving. I have been driving since I was 12, backcountry road practice, and I will never get a license to drive here. Everyone drives offensively, to the point that riding shotgun in a taxi can be a harrowing experience for the uninitiated. The holy shit handles are definitely a boon here. I was the opposite. China to Canada. Couldn't get used to how slow everyone was moving with so much space between them. Felt like the same distance would take twice as long with half the traffic.